So before I start, can we all just stand up and stretch a little bit? Shake it out, shake it out. Mine is called Courageous Conversations, Navigating Uncomfortable Topics with Grace and Empathy. And so this, following these great presentations before me, this one may be a little heavy. So I would like to encourage you, if at any point that you feel any kind of discomfort, lean into that instead of shying away from it. But if it does become too much for you, feel free to stand up, shake it out, get it out, kind of walk outside if you want, take a break, plug your ears, ignore me, whatever. In today's world, we often find ourselves in situations where we need to discuss uncomfortable topics, whether that's in our personal lives or in my case as an executive director working in the nonprofit sector. These conversations can be challenging, but they are essential for growth, understanding, and healing. And today I'd like to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned navigating through these conversations with grace and empathy. So early on in my career, I did a lot of sexual health work, which, as you can imagine, involves a lot of direct personal conversations with complete strangers, which means that it's just inherently uncomfortable. So I'm going to look at the crowd and ask these questions that I would ask some of the people that I would ask, but do not answer them. But it'd be like, how many sexual partners have you had in the past year? How many sexual partners have you had in the past 3 months? So when you're telling me that you've had these sexual partners, who are you having sex with? Are you having sex with men? Are you having sex with women, trans folk, non-binary folks? When you told me that you had these sexual partners, what type of sex are you having? Are you having anal sex, oral sex, vaginal sex? Remember, these are complete strangers that I'm asking these questions to. So it's both me having to be uncomfortable asking those questions and imagine their uncomfortability of answering these questions as well, right? And I'll kind of stop there, but it gets, as you can imagine, the conversations get more and more graphic with, again, complete strangers. As I kind of went mid-level in my career when I was doing more case management and housing case management, then we have to enter, in addition to the sexual health, I have to ask questions about your personal finances. So how much money are you making annually? Can I see your last 3 pay stubs? Well, actually, I was trying to be polite, but I have to, for eligibility purposes, I have to see your pay stubs for eligibility. So I see that you're qualified for our program, but I've also noticed that your monthly expenses are way exceeding your monthly income. Why don't we sit down and do a budget and let me tell you what I think you should be doing about your personal finances. And then at the executive director level that I am now, I have to have other conversations. You two have been working together, but you don't seem to be getting along. So now I have to have an hour and a half conversation about what's going on with you two and why can't you work together. I understand that you're our funding source and we really appreciate the money that you've been giving us, but you paid us to do A, B, and C, and you're asking my overworked staff to do D, E, and F, but you don't want to give us more money. Let's have a conversation about that. So these are just examples of uncomfortable situations and topics that I have to deal with throughout my career, and that's why I decided this translates into church life, because there's often conversations that we kind of need to be having, but sometimes don't have as well. Some of the learning objectives, what I kind of want you to walk away with today is understanding the benefits of having these conversations about uncomfortable topics. Number 2, identifying the barriers of why we don't have the conversations that we need to be having sometimes. And the third, giving you some kind of strategies so you can begin this process of having these uncomfortable conversations with people. But to manage expectations, what you will not get from this is the ability to overcome your reluctance to talking about it. That's just always going to remain. By definition, uncomfortable topic of conversation is something that you don't want to talk about. You're definitely not going to become experts in this. Even doing this after 20 years, I'm not an expert. I still feel reluctance to talking about some of these things. And third, you're not going to have the ability to transform an uncomfortable conversation into a comfortable one. That's just not going to happen. It's going to remain uncomfortable. So let's begin by acknowledging the power of dialogue. Conversation has the potential to connect us, bridge divides, and foster empathy. In the nonprofit sector, it's often necessary to engage in these difficult conversations to address complex issues such as poverty, inequality, and social justice. But if dialogue has the power to kind of address these things, why does it always feel like there's an elephant in the room? We have to talk about this. It's some of the thoughts that run through my mind. I don't know how to talk about this. I'm uncomfortable bringing this up. I'm scared of what might happen if I talk about this particular topic. So what is step one to addressing this? Well, step one is embracing vulnerability. It is okay to feel uncomfortable or scared, but you will get through it. You will get through it. Feel the fear, but push through it. Courageous conversations require us to be vulnerable and open to the possibility of discomfort. It's about acknowledging our own imperfections and biases, recognizing that we don't have all of the answers, and being willing to listen to and learn from others. It is also important to recognize that the topic of conversation may require the other party to be vulnerable as well, even if they don't necessarily appear to be that way outwardly. So I love this slide because this is your comfort zone. And then this is where the magic happens. And there's no other way for you to get to this transformational space without leaving your comfort zone. But some tips that may help. Naming it. Naming it to yourself or even naming it out loud. This is an uncomfortable topic. I'm not comfortable talking about this, but I kind of feel the need to. Just name it. Writing it down. That's a good thing. Writing it down before you have that conversation so you're clear about what your ideas and what you specifically want to talk about. Time box the topic. And that specifically means give yourself a certain amount of time to talk about it. Hey, I need to talk to you. Can I talk to you about 20 or 45 minutes to talk about this thing? And then when that time expires, let's revisit this at another time, even if the conversation isn't complete. Give the conversation space. And that can mean multiple things. It means give it space for what you're going to talk about and what may come up during that conversation. And also give space for you to digest what you're learning through that conversation. So a lot of times you may enter a conversation with certain things in mind, that person responded in a certain way, and you need time to digest that. And that's okay, give that space. Be like, oh, I really need to think about what you just told me. I really wasn't expecting that. Allow for follow-up. A conversation doesn't have to end and begin with one conversation. Sometimes conversations can be multiple times that you have to talk about something. And then call a timeout. If you become too emotional, it's too much for you, just say, okay, I know I initiated this conversation, but I need to digest this a little bit. Let's take a time out and reconvene at another time. Active listening. When having uncomfortable conversations, listen more than you speak. Active listening is really key. Too often we listen to respond rather than to understand. And in the nonprofit sector, we encounter diverse perspectives and experiences. When we actively listen, we create this space for people to express themselves, and we show that we value their input. Stole this right from the internet. A lot of this is self-explanatory when doing active listening, but pay attention. Don't interrupt. That seems to be common sense, but it's really not. People interrupting conversations all the time. And when I say don't interrupt, I mean, like, seriously, do not interrupt. Some people will talk for 45 minutes straight. If you're having an uncomfortable conversation and someone is going on and on and on, let them. Remember, you've already time boxed it. You already determined I'm going to talk to this for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45, whatever. If they take the whole time talking, that's great. That just means that you need multiple conversations. But it's important that a person feels that you have listened to them. So do not interrupt. And I have literally sat sometimes for an hour. I need to talk to you about something, and they talk for a complete hour, and I'm like, okay, well, that was a lot. We're going to have to revisit this, but I want to make sure that you were heard. So I do not interrupt when I'm having serious conversations. You always want to summarize what you heard to make sure that the person has felt heard and you have actually heard what they said. Because if you summarize it and it's not correct, they will correct you. Maintain eye contact, show interest, all of that. So show interest is automatic. If you're like listening and not interrupting, you're showing interest. Ask for clarification. Okay, you said this. I want to make sure that I understand you fully. Is this what you meant by that? Or explain that more. Give me more detail about that. Use positive body language, paraphrase, withhold judgment, which is hard, especially if this is something that you're passionate about. Emotions can be elicited in unexpected ways sometimes, but do your best to withhold judgment. Show empathy, repeat key phrases, and then share. Seek common ground. Now, please note that this is not always possible, but it should always try to be attempted. In my work, I found that seeking common ground is essential even when discussing uncomfortable topics. There are often shared values or goals that we can serve as a foundation in conversations. Identifying these commonalities will help build bridges between people who initially seem divided. And then empathy, that's just the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Empathy is at the heart of every courageous conversation. It is about putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, trying to understand their feelings and experiences. And as Episcopalians, we're called to love our neighbors as ourselves. So empathy is how we do this in action. It's love being put into action. And the power of storytelling. Storytelling is a potent tool in fostering empathy. Sharing personal stories allows us to connect on a deeper level, transcending statistics and abstract ideas. It humanizes the issues that we're discussing and reminds us that behind every challenge, there are real people with real experiences. And inevitably, dealing with disagreements. Disagreements does not mean arguments. Remember, we're trying to have compassionate conversations, not arguments. If you find yourself segue into something that feels like an argument, it's probably a good idea to put it on pause and revisit it. Not all conversations are going to be easy. Disagreements are natural, but how we handle them is what matters. It's crucial to remember that we can disagree about something without being disagreeable, and we can maintain respect and dignity even in the face of differing opinions. Kind of 5 ways to respectfully disagree. Number 1, don't make it personal, which is not always easy. Avoid putting down or attacking the other person's ideas or beliefs. And I put most of the time because sometimes there are some things that you should attack. If your thing is like, we want to kill all queer people, yeah, I'm gonna attack that. I'm just putting it out there right now. Like, I'm not going to even entertain that. Use I statements to communicate how you feel, think, and what you want and need. Listen carefully to the other point of view and try to stay calm. The key to dealing with disagreements, conflicts, and feedback is emotional honesty and mutual respect. And building bridges, this is the whole point of having uncomfortable conversations to begin with. Courageous conversations are not just about talking, they're about building bridges. In the nonprofit sector, this is often means collaborating with diverse stakeholders. These collaborations can be very challenging, but they're also where the real change happens. And finally, overcoming fear. The biggest barrier to having courageous conversations is fear. Fear about what you think the other person is gonna say, fear about what may happen for bringing up a topic, etc. Fear can be a significant barrier to these courageous conversations. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of judgment, fear of backlash. But we must remember that courage is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to act despite that. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with this thought. Courageous conversations are an essential part of our journey as individuals and as a community. They require vulnerability, active listening, empathy, and a commitment to finding common ground. They are a powerful tool to addressing the complex issues that we face in the nonprofit sector, in our religious communities, and in life in general. As Episcopalians, we are guided by the principles of love, compassion, and justice. Courageous conversations allow us to live out these principles in the world. So I encourage all of you to embrace the discomfort, seek understanding, and approach these conversations with grace and empathy. And finally, I would like to present a challenge to you over the next coming week or two in the future. Have a conversation about one of these topics with someone that you will probably disagree with. Practice this. How about gender-affirming care for children? reparations for descendants of slaves, sexual morals and the role of St. George's, sexual education for minors and the role of St. George's, decriminalizing HIV transmission, that's always a hot bucket topic in my field, and St. George's and tokenism, ooh. Let's have these conversations and give yourself practice, because what this will do is open the door for other things that pop up in our community and in life in general. So thank you for your time and attention today. Let's continue to engage in these courageous conversations, not only here, but in all aspects of our life, as we strive to create a more just and compassionate world.